Well, welcome back to the Health Chat. I am Dr. Greg Nye.
And I'm Dr. Greg Eckel.
And we're finally back. It's been, how long has it been?
It's been too long.
Too long. We probably can tell we look older. But, all right, so we're here to talk to you today about seasonal affective disorder, depression, some of those emotional components that especially come up this time of the year, holidays, all those things.
Really uplifting topic for you this holiday season.
But an important one. A lot of people deal with this. Many people come in, no matter what else they might be coming in for, headaches or stomach problems. Many times they're telling us also that they deal with depression, especially around the holidays and the winter season. So,
and it may not be named, they might not say depression, but they are giving us all the signs and symptoms of depression.
Right, yeah. And so we want to talk through today just kind of some ideas around how we think about it in the naturopathic world in addressing those particular issues that especially come up around wintertime and seasons. Of course, the same principles apply any time of the year, but it just tends to be more common in the wintertime. So I guess the first way to get into this is to think about something that we always think about, no matter what the condition is that we're dealing with, and that is to ask the question, what might not be present in this person that needs to be present? And of course, I'm thinking about nutrients.
Sure.
Right?
And before you had a really nice way of orienting towards like three components that we think of. So just give you an overview of, we've got what might be missing, we've got what is in the environment, and then we've got the emotional sphere of what are the stories that we have.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, kind of the what's not there that needs to be,
Yeah.
what is there that shouldn't be.
Right.
And then how are we thinking about our life?
How do we interpret that? So we'll start with the what may not be there on the nutrient front.
Yeah. You want me to go on
Sure.
that? Well, of course, the first thing we always are going to test, and that is vitamin D level. There are many studies showing that, in fact, when you supply adequate amounts of vitamin D to people who score high on depression scales, especially seasonal affective disorder, that when you replace the vitamin D, their symptoms improve, and it's often dramatic. There have been some studies that compare vitamin D to things like light exposure, which another common therapy is to use bright light exposure in the winter.
Full spectrum, right?
Yeah, and in fact, the vitamin D outperforms light as a way of relieving symptoms.
Go figure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're always testing that.
Yeah, and that is one, I would say over the last 10 years of testing folks in Portland, Oregon, I've seen only 5 individuals with adequate or ideal numbers of vitamin D.
Right, and even in the middle of the summer.
Right.
I mean, it really is amazing.
In wintertime, it's been sunny recently, and people say, oh, I'm going outside to get my vitamin D. You're not. It's, the sun is so far in the horizon that you're just not converting any vitamin D, even on a sunny day. And that's in the Northwest, so it depends on what your latitude is. But it's just such a major player.
And there, another thing to add on there is that vitamin D is inhibited in the body in the presence of stress. So stress causes more cortisol, and the cortisol prevents the vitamin D from being utilized. And so what tends to go up in the holiday season is stress for most people. And so even someone who has been taking an amount of vitamin D that keeps them at a nice level might need extra when they get into the holiday season, when the sun is lower and they're more stressed out and they're sitting inside more often.
Yeah. And, we're not, I think you've heard us extol the virtues of vitamin D. We're not saying this is a cure-all or anything like that, but it's definitely one major player that you need to get assessed. So we're not going to make recommendations as far as doses of vitamin D, but just know it should be part of your yearly physical. If you're getting blood work, get your vitamin D level checked. That actually is a great segue into, what other things go up during the holidays? We were talking about carbohydrate intake for folks.
Right.
And around folks with depression, there's a desire or craving for carbohydrates, and you think about comfort foods, and there's an emotional component to that as well, but more on the nutrient what isn't there. Possibly people wanting to create more serotonin unconsciously, craving a certain food component.
And that's actually been worked out. It's known that for some people, that the more when carbohydrate comes in, the way it gets processed in the body, it leads to the production of serotonin in the brain, and that process happens more dramatically in people who report depression and seasonal affective disorder than it does for other people. And so people with depression and related issues crave carbohydrate because they do get a mood elevation from the carbohydrate that they don't get, or that other people don't necessarily get. And so there is, part of that whole process is having to break that cycle and really transition people's diet away from that heavy carbohydrate, because once there's been time away from that high carb diet, you can break that cycle. I mean, there's a lot to it. I'm simplifying it. It's not simply just don't eat carbohydrate for a while.
Right.
But in fact, there is an underlying addiction to carbohydrate that happens. And I know many people are saying, oh yeah, that's
You're
me.
right. That's me,
bread
right?
and
Craving
pasta and, oh my
carbs. Right.
And so part of the treatment process is really working around that as well.
Yeah, changing the whole gut ecosystem along those lines.
Yeah.
And then, countless books, Sugar Blues, there's all kinds of evidence to support on that sugar intake and what that does to your emotions and your mood.
Yeah. The second piece there is to say what might be present that shouldn't be. And so around the wintertime seasons, we tend to spend more time indoors. And one of the problems can be, especially in an environment like Portland where we are, is that indoors can potentially be an unhealthy place.
Right.
And we're both learning a lot more now about the potential for exposure to molds and how to assess that kind of environmentally, the issues that come up around that. And so this is someone who comes in not just reporting depression, but they have a lot of concurrent symptoms that are going with it. That they're very fatigued, that they have recurrent headaches,
sinusitis.
They're very thirsty all the time, or they have muscle spasms. So there's a bigger picture that I'm more likely to think, wait a minute, something else is going on here. This is not your run-of-the-mill seasonal affective disorder, right?
Right.
And so that involves some testing that we have people do of their house, some lab testing, because we have to figure out if there's an exposure that's driving not only the depression, but all these other things. And then, there's a fairly complicated pathway of how to...
Not necessarily our starting spot, but definitely looking at home environment and environment in general. And then that leads into, environmental toxicity, our sedentary lifestyle in the winter time with it's cold and rainy, people aren't getting out and moving their bodies. So you look at, there's mold possibly there's off-gassing from paints or other solvents in the household.
Sitting under fluorescent lights.
Right, yeah. So there is that environmental component of what do we need to remove from environment. And then the third component, which I find really interesting, and you've been really hot on the topic of lately, you want to talk about that?
It gets at this question of what kind of stories are we telling around holidays. And for so many people, holidays are a stressful time.
They're stressed, right.
And,
countless times I'm hearing, I hate the holidays. There's so much stress.
Yeah.
And, my reply is, well, why is it like that? You get to create what you want.
Right.
Why don't you create something that you want to do? You don't have to carry on these traditions that you inherited from the past of creating this stressful time.
Yeah. But people have such big stories around holiday.
Yeah.
And so stress is really embedded in that story, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that exploration of what is that story that we're telling, and how that story takes us away from just the experience of the holiday.
Now.
It's not being present in that.
Yeah.
There is a whole field that I'm very interested in. It's referred to as positive psychology that addresses many issues that are related to the way that we're relating to our lives.
Right.
And all the components that go into a feeling that we are flourishing within our lives. It's not about just being happy. It's about creating meaning. It's about feeling engaged.
Having purpose.
In things that we're doing.
Yeah.
Having purpose, having a network. So a lot of elements that go into that feeling and flourish.
Sure. So, so here's to you having an enriched holiday time this year. And definitely, I want to tune everybody into our Facebook page. We're going to be having a conversation on there shortly about the flu vaccine and what our opinion is on that. That'll be coming out. If you don't subscribe to our newsletter, that's where that article is coming out. So please get on the website and subscribe to our newsletter. We're putting a lot of great information out, and please share us with your friends and family.
Thanks for joining us.